Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in again. We continue to build an Android browser today, and the browser lives in this repository. It's called IceAnt, and of course we do not build the browser completely from scratch. We make use of the Mozilla Android components that live in this repository. They are a bunch of libraries that you can use to build browser-like applications. And then we also make use of Gecko View, which is the browser engine from Mozilla wrapped as an Android library that we can use in our app to render websites. And let me switch to Android Studio and quickly show the browser we've built so far. When we launch a browser, it restores the last session. The last page we opened was The Verge. We can go to whatever page we want, let's say mozilla.org, and then we have a little tab switcher here where we can open different new tabs, and as you saw we already have autocomplete. So we started something new last week, and that is rewriting this UI using Jetpack Compose. So far, this is just a regular Android view based layout. And if I switch to the Compose version, there's not much happening yet. So we added the toolbar, which already shows the current URL. And that's basically it. We can't edit, we can't render web content. And that's basically what I would like to do today. We integrate the browser engine so that we can render web content, and we should have a way to edit the URL of the current page. And then we can almost already start using this browser from this kind of view. So we created two entry points, two launchers. One will launch the old legacy UI, and the other one launches the Compose version in a different tab. In a different task. So let's look at the code. So we have this browser composable, which currently just creates a column with two entries, a toolbar and web content. The toolbar subscribes to our browser store, which contains the state of the whole browser, and then invokes display toolbar, which currently just displays the text, and that's what we see at the top. And then web content is just text, showing this text content here. So we need to actually integrate the browser engine view in here, which is still an Android view, but we will make use of the interop that Jetpack Compose gives us. And then we need to enhance this toolbar. The idea here was to have two different versions of a toolbar, a display toolbar, which, if I switch to the view-based UI, is this version that just displays what page you're currently on, and then an edit toolbar, and that's the mode when you can type into the toolbar and change the URL. Okay. I think I would love to try integrating the web content first. And if you have any questions, suggestions, or want to help me, please use the chat if you're watching this live. I don't have that much Jetpack Compose experience yet, so you will see me struggle and look at the docs quite often, I guess. So that's actually a good point. Let's switch to the docs and find out how we can actually integrate a view, because I don't know this from the top of my head. Interop. This is integrating Jetpack Compose into a view system. We want exact opposite this here. So there's an Android view composable, which has a factory where we can apparently create the view, and then update method. I assume that gets invoked whenever this composable needs to re-render. So let's try this. Web content is now an Android view. And then we will have some kind of factory method and an update method. I think it got the view here. And then we can remove this text. So just to make sure I understood this correctly, let's try with an ordinary text view, and that's probably should look like this. The end of it. Oh, okay, you can use the regular modifiers to define how large the view should be or what kind of space it should fill out. And then let's say, let's for test do exactly the same. Display the URL here, but just in an Android view, because later we also need the current tab and tell the view to render this tab. Let's essentially copy what we have above in the toolbar. We get the browser store. This is the thing that has the whole state. We observe the store, map the current state to just the URL of the current tab. And then whenever this changes, we assign this here. URL.value. Let's use the property syntax. Okay, let's deploy. It's right here. Okay, yeah, we need to pass in the store. Let's see. I hope you brought coffee. We'll be building a lot, I guess, to try things. Then let's see, the plan is to, if this works, replace the text view with the engine view that renders the web content, and then here we will change this to not only give us the current selected URL, but the current selected tab, and with the tab we can update the view to tell it what to render. Changes not apply, reinstall and restart the app. Yeah, sure, just do it. Okay, this is the legacy UI, and restored the Verge. Let's go to the Compose UI. Awesome, that worked. This is our tool, this is our web content, and now we are going to turn this into the actual web content. So for that, we need access to the engine, I think, and this is one of the things we can inject here. Engine. Engine is basically an interface, since those Mozilla Android components that I mentioned before can support different browser engines. And once we have access to the engine, we can pass this down first so that we can use it in the composable. Then pass it down to the web content. And now we can actually ask the engine to create a view for us. Pass in the context. Remove the old version. Awesome. Why is it red? Oh yeah. That's something you might need to know. The create view function returns an engine view, and engine view is an interface since, as I mentioned before, there can be multiple engines, so they might need different engine view implementations. But there's no view interface, so you can't define an engine view interface that extends view, since view is a class. But there is a helper that turns this into a view. And now we need to tell the view what to render, and we, instead of getting the selected tab content URL, we only want the selected tab. And if we got a selected tab, then now that view is cast to a generic view, we probably need to cast it back as engine view. And then depending, oh, let's rename this, it's not the URL anymore. Depending if we have a tab or not, we need to do something else. Tab.value. So if it's null, we say release, which means there's nothing for you to render here. We say engine view render tab.value, and then we want the engine state and the engine session. And this one is actually nullable. So a little bit of more code here. So if this is not null, then we render. Oops. Actually, now that I look at this, we probably could map to the engine session immediately here, but let's do this in a second once it's working. Why is this? Smart cast to tab session state is impossible because tab value is a property that has open or custom getter. All right. Well then maybe let's actually do this here before we fix it down below. We can map immediately to the engine session here. And then if engine session value is 0, is null, sorry, we release. Otherwise we render this engine session. And we still have this smart cast problem to solve here. Okay, then I guess we need to cast it ourselves here. Oh. Put it session for now. Yes. engine session dot value as engine session. And if the session is null, we release. If it's not null, we engine view, render it, and it can be null. Of course, now it tells us this cast is not needed. If I remove it, not happy either, is it? No, it's happy. Okay. Yeah. Since now we definitely know that it's not null anymore. Now, let's see if it actually renders web content. Oh, I just noticed a problem with this code, but let's see. Oh, this worked. We have officially rendered web content inside Jetpack Compose. There's a problem with this though. I think. Kill the app and launch the Compose view. Oh, yeah, this of course doesn't restore anything at all. But there's a problem here. If we have a null session here, we actually do not know anymore if the selected tab was null or the engine session was null. If the selected tab was null, we do not have a tab, we do not need to render anything, and calling release is great. If we have a tab that does not have an engine session, which means in our store, in our data model, we have this tab, but we didn't tell the engine about it yet, since we never rendered this tab, for example. And this is a different case, because then we need to tell the engine we would love to have an engine session for this. So we still need to distinguish between those two. So let's get back to the previous version where we said, give us the selected tab. Then we go back to this and say, if tab, or let's call it something different, selected tab maybe. And then we say, give us the selected tab. We just do it once so that it's not using this dot value getter more than once. The tab is null. We release engine view. Oh, the cast of the view needs to happen first. Say release. And if this is not the case, we get the engine session of this tab. Engine state, engine session. Now we take another look if this one is null. We need to do something. Otherwise, we render it. Awesome. Let's deploy this once. If you have any questions, just put them into the chat. I'm happy to answer them at any time. Hey, let's see. is the old UI. It's loading the verge. And now we switch to the Compose UI. Awesome. They're working, and I should even be able to click on things. It's kind of slow. Not sure if it's caused by the emulator. Like, building Android apps and streaming and using Android Studio and Gradle at the same time is quite taxing. But it worked. We already see our toolbar is not that great. Like, now the URL is 2 lines of text. But it's working. We can browse. So awesome. So this is a special case in situations where this tab was not rendered before. Like in this case, we kind of cheated because we launched this legacy UI first and it already rendered the tab, so we already had an engine session to render. So let's take a look at how this is working in the old code. In the old code, we made use of this session feature that takes care for us of basically all of this glue code that we wrote here. This time we wrote it manually because we wanted to express this in Jetpack Compose code, right? And therefore we didn't make use of this feature component that kind of interacts on the view level. And if we look into this feature, it uses a presenter and it kind of does the same. It's a little bit more complex since it needs to do more things. But what we need is kind of this. Whenever there's no engine session for the current tab, we dispatch an action on the store. That's the thing we observe together, and tell the store, hey, we need an engine session for this tab. The store itself can only update the state based on very simple functions at the end of the day, and this is something more complex, which is done by this middleware that we added in the last stream. This engine middleware. It will see that we requested an engine session for this tab. We'll take whatever is needed to actually create this and then dispatch an action on the store to edit, and then our observer here will get invoked again and we will see the engine session. So let's copy this. And then there is one more thing we might need to change here. Potentially. Or maybe not. We will see that something inside the selected tab has changed, and then we will re-invoke this method. I think this is fine for now. There's something we need to change here eventually. I just added to do here. The selected tab will change more, or not the selected. Data inside the selected tab will change more often and causing a recompose too often. Because right now we are observing the selected tab. The selected tab contains, let's go to the tab session, contains a bunch of stuff. This one, we actually only need to invoke if the engine session changes here, right? Or the selected tab itself. And that's kind of what we do in this presenter here. In this logic, that might be weird to read at first, but if the ID of the current tab changes, which means the selected tab has changed, the user actually selected a different tab, or the engine session changed, that's what we want too. Or if this tab crashed, that's something we do not care about right now. Or in this presenter, we also look for the first content full paint. This is a new tab. There might be nothing to render yet until the engine has done a bunch of stuff, parsing the HTML and so on. And we can wait for this if we want to. So back to this. This for now works, but we need to be more mindful about how often we want this to recompose. And in those situations, we might need a better way to map to what we care about here. And not only to the selected tab, since it's a data class with a bunch of stuff that changes all the time, like the URL. Alright, but let's live with that for today. Now let's look at the toolbar. Which is the right activity? This is it. So let's make this, turn this into something that we can change in here. And with that, let's also reorganize this code a little bit before we start doing this. Maybe start with the compose package, and then let's create browser composable. That is this one, and then we want browser toolbar is that's just toolbar. Okay. Toolbar, which contains the toolbar. Oops. And also the display toolbar. And then let's create web content. Where is it? Yeah. And what else? Oh yeah, this little helper that helps us observing the store. Let's maybe create a package for extension function, since this is an extension function on browser store. Okay, awesome. So now everything is nicely separated for now. Let's remove those empty lines. All right, let's look at the toolbar in isolation now. And fix the import. Let's quickly see. Here's an import to fix. Okay, back to the toolbar. So I mentioned before, we might want to separate between an edit version and display version. So let's add the edit version. And we will need an input. Input field? No, input. Was it text field? Yeah, text field. Okay, and the text field needs a value. Let's see, we pass down a URL, pass it in here. What else do we need? Yeah, a method that gets invoked if it changes. On value change. Do nothing for now. And let's see, whenever this version gets clicked, we need to switch to the other toolbar. Let's add this here. There's a modifier clickable on click, and we pass this up to the toolbar. I think, yeah, we need to tell the toolbar to switch. We invoke on click. And then we need to somehow remember this here. This is the URL, and on click we now need to change the state. Let's look at the docs again. Yeah, I think we need something like this. We switch between the states. Let's see, edit mode. Remember, mutable state of. Also, initially we are not in edit mode. And if I click on the toolbar, we are in edit mode. And if we are not in edit mode, we display the render the display toolbar, and otherwise the edit toolbar. Pass in the URL. This itself does not need to be mutable. Let's see if switching just works. Old content, a new one. Now I click on the URL. Yeah, it's an edit field. And as you can see, if I actually try to edit it, it doesn't change since you don't do anything here just yet. So I think we are only interested in the URL once the user says go. So we might need to remember the current edited version until the user presses enter, and then we pass it up to the toolbar. The toolbar can probably switch back to the display toolbar and also tell the browser to load this new thing we entered. So let's try adding a local version. You remember the state, and initially it's the URL, and we pass in this as value here. And now whenever it changes, we just change this property, which is now also named text. This is on value change. Let's call it value text value equals value. Let's see, now we should be able to edit the URL. And then we need to figure out how to pass this up. And maybe also make it just one line. Close. Okay, click it. And I can edit it. Awesome. So let's see. Select all. Right, we need, instead of extending the text field, we need to somehow handle the enter. There are like input method or something like this. On. Let's actually go to the text field. Maybe that's easier to read. On value change modifier read only label failing is error. Keyboard options, keyboard action. Let's see, keyboard actions equals keyboard actions default. Oh, on done, on go. Is it done or go? How do I even define which I want? Is it keyboard options? Keyboard options equals key options. Can I pass in? Autocorrect keyboard type. Here it is, I think. Keyboard type equals keyboard type URI, and the other one is IME action. I guess it's go. Let's see what the doc of go says. Represents that the user would like to go to the target of the text. Here, visiting a URL. Yeah, perfect. So this means here we also need on go. And now we need a way to pass it up. On go. Let's call it on commit. That's, I think, how it's called in the other toolbar in the view system. And we need to pass up the text and nothing to return. On commit text.value. And then here on commit we switch back to display mode. Okay, let's switch to the Compose UI. It's also still lines, these two, and I this and press. Oh yeah, I can still press enter, but here's the action, and it's back to display mode. Okay, this kind of works. Make it one line. Go back to text field. Oh. No, it doesn't allow me to click inside. Okay, now it works. Text style, interesting, single line and max line. It's as confusing as the view without both. Why are there both? Params. It's hard to read. Single line. When set to true, this text becomes a single horizontal scrolling text field instead of wrapping. Yes, you want this. Keyword will be informed to not show the return key. Okay. Note that the max lines parameter will be ignored. Okay. And let's lose single line. Let's actually move this up here. And now let's also look at the display version. Text. Modifier. Is there also a single line? No. Okay, let's look at text. Modifier. Soft wrap. Max lines. Okay, here we need to use max lines. Max lines equals 1. Okay, try this. So what did we do wrong? Comma. And if this works, then let's make sure we actually load the website. All right, this toolbar still looks like crap, but it looks way better than before. Now it's a single line. We need to somehow show that the URL actually continues here. I can click on it. Now it's somehow a large field. But I can edit it. And if I press enter, it doesn't recognize enter for some kind of reason. Pressing go works. I wonder if there's an action here. On done, on next, on previous, on search, on send. Let's see if there is something in the doc. This is on done. This is run when the user triggers the done action. It's on go. And triggers the next action. Is on search. Interesting. I was expecting maybe an on enter or something like this. But this looks... We did say the action is go, and here's an on go. Maybe it's just confused since I use return on my keyboard right now. Maybe it works better on a phone. I am not sure. Okay, let's ignore this for now. Let's actually make sure we load the page. Toolbar. So that's where we can use those use cases that we have talked before in one of the previous streams. Let's go back to this module. That's a Dagger-held configuration that allows us to inject use cases. Use cases wrap functionality like, I want to load a URL in the current tab. There are multiple steps needed to actually do this. With a use case, you can just invoke one method on a use case that does all of those things for you. And since they are objects, you can also pass them around. And that's, I think, what we are going to try. Let's go back to our compose activity. And then let's inject them. Session use cases, which are all about sessions. You can think of them as tabs, more or less, in this context. And if we have a session use case, there are interesting methods like load a URL. And we can either just load it in a current tab or specify which tab and do a bunch of other things. But for now, in this situation, we just pass them down to our browser. And I think eventually we might want to maybe look into options how we can make this nice. Now I wonder, do we actually want to pass this down? Or do I... Maybe not. Maybe instead we add a lambda here that I can define. On load URL, something like this. And it gets the URL. Doesn't need to return anything. And we invoke this here. Like the toolbar probably doesn't need to know about how we actually do this. So let's just pass it to the browser. And the browser here maybe can just do it, I guess. On load URL. This is still, by the way, one part where I'm always not sure yet in Jetpack Compose. Like the load URL case, I can invoke this all the way down here in the toolbar. I can invoke it here in the browser, or can I pass it even higher up to the activity? Like, where's the right place to actually do this? So now let's do it here. And since we just want to do it in a current tab, we only need to pass in the URL. Okay, let's try this. This is the legacy view-based UI. Switch to the Compose version. Okay. Let's, for the first time ever, select all, navigate to, let's see, first we need to write a full URL. I think we do not have any fixing or cleaning up. What's a good place to go? Let's go to mozilla.org. That's where we went earlier. Go. Awesome. Our toolbar is still looking like crap, but it's kind of working. Nice. think that's probably it for today. In the next episodes, I guess we could look at making the toolbar look nicer. Potentially, like, whoop, was a crash that I will just ignore. So let's maybe make sure our toolbar looks nicer. Maybe like this one, we need at least like a loading indicator. Maybe show the lock icon. We could think about having menu, or the tab counter would be interesting too. And then eventually a tab switcher. All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you had fun. Let me know in the comments if there is something that interests you that I could show. Right. Thank you very much, and bye bye.